If metal coins were the muscle of early economies, paper money was the moment humanity discovered the power of imagination, disciplined by authority. Long before Europe debated banks and bills of exchange, long before central bankers learned to whisper promises into markets, China had already crossed a radical threshold, the idea that money did not need to be heavy to be real. It only needed to be believed. This leap, so ordinary to us now, was one of the most consequential financial inventions in history, and like all great monetary revolutions, it was born not from theory, but from necessity. To understand why paper money emerged in China, one must first understand scale. Imperial China was vast, geographically, demographically, administratively. Copper coins, strung together in cumbersome bundles, had served commerce for centuries. But as trade expanded during the Tang and Song dynasties, metal money became a bottleneck. Merchants traveling long distances faced practical limits. Transporting thousands of coins was slow, dangerous, and expensive. Wealth existed, but it could not move efficiently. An economy was straining against the physical limits of its medium of exchange. The first response was not paper issued by the state, but paper issued by merchants. During the Tang dynasty, traders began using deposit receipts, documents acknowledging that coins had been left with a trusted party and could be redeemed elsewhere. These instruments, known as flying cash, did not replace coins. They represented them. Value still lived in metal. Paper was merely a bridge. But bridges have a way of becoming destinations. By the time of the Song dynasty in the 10th and 11th centuries, China's economy had become the most advanced in the world. Urbanization accelerated. Markets deepened. Taxation grew more complex. The state faced the same constraint merchants had faced earlier: too much economic activity chasing too little metal. Copper shortages emerged. Mining could not keep pace with commerce. Something had to give. What followed was revolutionary. The Song government began issuing officially sanctioned paper notes, jiaozi initially backed by coin reserves, and limited in circulation. These were not experiments in abstraction. They were pragmatic solutions to logistical strain. The state recognized that paper, when anchored to authority and trust, could substitute for metal without collapsing confidence. And for a time it worked. Paper money transformed the economy. Transactions accelerated. Trade expanded inland. Tax collection became easier. The state gained a powerful new lever: the ability to increase liquidity without mining more metal. For the first time in history, money supply could be adjusted by policy rather than geology. This was both a triumph and a temptation. The brilliance of Chinese paper money lay not in its novelty, but in its institutional framing. Early issues carried expiration dates. Redemption promises were explicit. Printing was centralized. Counterfeiting was punished severely. The state understood something modern systems would relearn painfully centuries later. Paper money survives only as long as restraint survives with it. Yet restraint is fragile. As dynasties changed and pressures mounted, wars, rebellions, fiscal shortfalls, the temptation to print grew stronger. Under the Yuan dynasty, paper money was expanded aggressively to fund imperial ambitions. Convertibility weakened. Confidence thinned. Prices rose. By the time of the Ming dynasty, paper money collapsed entirely, forcing a return to silver. China had already discovered the full cycle of fiat money centuries before: Europe innovation, expansion, abuse, and collapse. This is the often missed truth. China did not merely invent paper money. It invented inflation, monetary credibility, and monetary failure as systemic phenomena. The lessons were learned early, deeply, and repeatedly. When Marco Polo reached China in the 13th century, he was astonished. He described a society where the great Khan causeth the bark of trees to be made into something like paper, and that paper circulated as money by imperial decree. Europeans read these accounts with disbelief. Money without metal sounded like sorcery. In truth, it was governance. But Europe was not ready. Its political institutions were too fragmented, trust too localized, authority too contested. Paper money requires a credible center. China had one. Europe did not yet. For centuries afterward, Europe lagged behind. Its economies grew but cautiously. Metal constrained credit. Banking evolved slowly through bills of exchange and deposits. Paper instruments existed, but true state-backed fiat money remained rare and unstable. When Europe finally adopted paper money on a wide scale in Sweden, France, and later England, it repeated China's trajectory with eerie precision innovation, followed by overissuance, followed by inflation and collapse. John Law's Mississippi scheme was not a uniquely European folly. It was a late echo of lessons China had already learned. What made China's experience unique was not that it avoided failure. It did not, but that it understood the stakes earlier than anyone else. Chinese thinkers debated money not as a technical tool, but as a moral and political force. Too little money strangled trade. Too much money corrupted society. The balance was not mathematical, it was institutional. Paper money changed the relationship between state and economy forever. With metal money imposed discipline on rulers. With paper rulers imposed discipline, or failed to, on money. This inversion marked the birth of modern monetary politics. From that moment onward, inflation credibility and trust became inseparable from governance itself. Standing in that ancient Chinese marketplace watching paper notes pass from hand to hand, you would not see novelty. You would see familiarity. Prices adjusting. Confidence fluctuating. Authority asserting itself. The mechanisms feel modern because they are modern. Our central banks, our fiat currencies, our debates about inflation and debt are not new. They are refinements of a Chinese invention nearly 1,000 years old. And this is the deepest lesson of paper money's origin. Money is not a thing, it is a relationship. A relationship between issuer and user, between promise and belief. Paper merely made that relationship visible. It stripped away the illusion that value resided in metal and revealed the truth that value resides in trust. The tragedy and the genius of paper money is that it works until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, the collapse is not physical, but psychological. Coins can be melted. Notes must be believed. When belief breaks, money dies instantly. China learned this lesson early painfully and repeatedly. The rest of the world learned it later, often with greater damage. And as modern societies grapple with digital money, central bank currencies, and monetary experimentation, once again, they are unknowingly retracing a path. First, walked by Chinese administrators, merchants, and emperors, who discovered that the lightest form of money could carry the heaviest consequences. Consequences that would echo across centuries and continents, shaping every modern debate about inflation. Credibility and the power of the state to define value. Itself echoes that grow louder whenever money becomes easier to create, then trust a condition that has returned many times. Since the first paper note left a Chinese printing house, and one that now confronts the world yet again, as humanity stands on the brink of another monetary transformation. A transformation whose outcome will depend not on technology alone, but on whether societies remember the oldest lesson paper money ever taught, a lesson that becomes unavoidable when the promises written on money multiply faster than the belief that sustains them, a moment when innovation gives way to reckoning, a moment that arrives not with a crash of metal, but with the silent question of whether anyone still believes what the paper says, a question that history suggests is never answered gradually, but all at once. when confidence finally gives way and the world realizes that the true limit of money was never material scarcity, but human trust itself. A trust that once broken is extraordinarily difficult to restore, and whose erosion always marks the beginning of the next chapter in monetary history, a chapter that will unfold as the rest of the world slowly rediscovered one crisis at a time, what China had already learned centuries earlier, that paper money is not a shortcut around discipline, but a magnifier of it. For when paper money travels beyond the institutions that first contained it, it carries both its genius and its danger with equal force. Europe's eventual embrace of paper money was not an act of imitation, but of desperation. Wars had grown too large to fund with metal alone. Trade had expanded beyond the capacity of coin. States faced the same dilemma the Song emperors once faced. Economic activity demanded liquidity faster than minds could deliver it. And so paper returned this time, dressed in Western legal language banks and charters. Sweden issued banknotes in the 17th century. France experimented disastrously under John Law. England institutionalized paper more carefully through the Bank of England. Each episode echoed China's arc innovation, born of necessity success, enabled by trust, and crisis, triggered by excess. What China's experience clarifies is that paper money does not fail because it is paper. It fails because authority overreaches. The medium is neutral, restraint is not. When issuance remains aligned with productive capacity and credible governance, paper money can support extraordinary growth. When it becomes a substitute for reform discipline or taxation, it corrodes the very trust that sustains it. This is why China oscillated between paper and silver, why Europe oscillated between fiat and gold, and why modern economies oscillate between stimulus and austerity. The technology changes. The constraint does not. In this sense, the Chinese invention of paper money was not merely technical, it was philosophical. It forced societies to confront a truth. Metal had concealed. Money has no intrinsic value independent of belief. Gold had masked this reality by imposing physical limits. Paper removed the mask. From that moment onward, every monetary system became a test of governance. Inflation was no longer an accident of discovery or debasement. It became a policy outcome. Confidence was no longer incidental. It became central. This is why modern central banking is at its core an exercise in credibility management. Interest rates balance sheets forward guidance. These are tools for shaping belief. The paper money system that governs the world today is the direct descendant of Song dynasty innovation, filtered through centuries of trial collapse and refinement. When central banks insist that inflation is anchored, they are echoing an ancient concern. Will the public continue to believe the promise written on money? And this brings us to the present moment. As societies stand on the threshold of digital currencies, central bank, digital money, cryptocurrencies, tokenized assets, they are once again confronting the same dilemma. China faced 1,000 years ago how to separate the convenience of money creation from the temptation to abuse it. Digital money, like paper, before it reduces friction, it accelerates circulation, it lowers issuance costs, and in doing so, it amplifies the consequences of trust and mistrust alike. The Chinese invention of paper money reminds us that monetary revolutions are never final. They are cycles of forgetting and remembering. Each generation believes it has improved control. Each generation rediscovers limits. The lesson is not to reject innovation, but to anchor it institutionally. Paper money worked in China when issuance was limited, redemption credible, and authority respected. It failed when those anchors weakened. The same pattern governs modern fiat systems. When I reflect on the first paper notes passing through Song Dynasty markets, I see not an ancient curiosity, but a mirror. Those merchants and officials were grappling with the same forces we debate today: liquidity versus stability, flexibility versus discipline, growth versus trust. Their world did not collapse because they invented paper money. It convulsed when they forgot what made it work. And this is the enduring lesson of China's monetary innovation. Money is light only when belief is heavy. Remove belief, and even the most advanced monetary system becomes worthless instantly. Add belief, and even paper becomes powerful enough to move empires. If this story of paper money's origin changed how you think about modern fiat currencies, inflation, or digital money, share what stayed with you most. And if you want to continue this journey through the hidden architecture of financial history, follow the channel and stay with us, because every new form of money is only the latest chapter in a story that began long ago in Chinese marketplaces, where humanity first learned that value could be printed, but trust could not.